When Mike discovers his wife Linda's affair, his world crumbles. Fueled by betrayal, he methodically exposes her infidelity, setting off a chain of events that shatters their marriage and her career. As Linda pleads for forgiveness, Mike stands firm, determined to rebuild his life without her. But just as he begins to move forward, an unexpected tragedy strikes, forcing him to confront the complexities of love, regret, and forgiveness. In the aftermath, Mike must navigate the fragile balance between justice and compassion, uncovering a deeper understanding of loss and what it means to truly heal. This is a tale of heartbreak, vengeance, and the haunting power of unresolved love. The morning started like any other. The sun streamed through the blinds, and the faint scent of coffee wafted up from the kitchen. Linda, my wife of 12 years, was humming as she got ready for work. She looked stunning, as always, poised, professional, and completely composed. I sipped my coffee and watched her with a mix of admiration and familiarity. How could I have known that within days, my life would unravel? The first crack came subtly. Linda's phone buzzed on the counter while she was upstairs. I glanced at it casually, expecting a mundane notification or a work email. Instead, the name on the screen caught my eye, Alex, work. Something about it didn't sit right. I wasn't the paranoid type, but her phone had been buzzing more frequently over the past few months. She'd also become more guarded about it, carrying it everywhere like it was a vital organ. I shook off the thought, telling myself I was imagining things. But that nagging feeling followed me throughout the day, like a pebble in my shoe. That evening, Linda was unusually cheerful. She set the dinner table with her characteristic efficiency, even humming a tune as she poured glasses of wine. As we ate, she mentioned an upcoming work retreat. "It's a weekend thing," she said, twirling her fork. "The partners are bringing the whole team to this resort out in the countryside. Team building stuff, you know." I nodded, swallowing a bite of spaghetti. "Sounds fun. When is it?" "Next weekend," she replied. "I'll leave Friday morning and be back Sunday night." "Is it mandatory?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Her answer came a little too quickly. "Pretty much. Alex has been pushing for it. You know, the new partner. He's all about synergy and bonding." That name again. Alex. I didn't press further, but my gut churned with unease. The week leading up to the retreat passed in a blur of routine. Work kept me busy, but that nagging suspicion grew louder with every passing day. Linda seemed more distracted than usual, her laughter at my jokes a little too forced, her affection a bit too performative. Something was off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. The tipping point came Thursday night. I was working late in my home office when Linda's phone, left charging on the kitchen counter, buzzed again. I knew it wasn't right to snoop, but curiosity got the better of me. I unlocked it, her passcode hadn't changed, and scrolled through her messages. There they were. Texts from Alex. "Can't wait to see you this weekend. Got us the best villa at the resort. Just you and me, winky face." My stomach dropped. I scrolled further, my hands trembling. The texts painted a vivid picture of their relationship, flirtation, stolen moments, and plans for the retreat that had nothing to do with team building. I put the phone down, my chest tight with disbelief. I stared at it, half expecting the screen to light up again with some rational explanation. But it stayed dark, its secrets laid bare. I didn't confront Linda that night. She came home late from work and kissed me on the cheek, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I barely slept, my mind racing with questions and scenarios. How long had this been going on? Why Alex? What was I supposed to do now? By morning, I had a plan. At breakfast, I played it cool. Linda was chipper, chatting about her plans for the weekend. I asked her about the retreat again, pretending to be interested. She gave me a rehearsed spiel about networking opportunities and team-building exercises. It took everything in me not to call her out on her lies. Instead, I told her I'd be taking the kids to visit my parents for the weekend. "It'll give you a chance to focus on work," I said, forcing a smile. Linda looked relieved. "That's a great idea. Thanks, Mike." She kissed me goodbye and left for work, none the wiser. As soon as she was out the door, I picked up the phone and made a call. The private investigator's office smelled faintly of stale coffee and old paper. A middle-aged man with a wiry build and a sharp gaze sat across from me, a notebook and pen at the ready. "So, you think your wife's cheating?" he asked, cutting straight to the point. I nodded, sliding Linda's phone across the desk. "Her texts with this guy, Alex. They're planning something this weekend at a resort. I need proof." He skimmed through the messages, his expression neutral. "This should be straightforward. I'll tail them, get photos, timestamps, the works. You'll have everything you need by Sunday night." "Thank you," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. He nodded. "It's gonna hurt, but you'll have clarity. Sometimes that's all you can ask for." Friday morning arrived, and Linda was all smiles as she packed her bags. She kissed me goodbye, told the kids to behave, and drove off. I watched her car disappear down the street, a knot tightening in my chest. The investigators' updates came in throughout the day. Linda and Alex met at a coffee shop before heading to the resort. There were photos of them laughing, holding hands, and checking into a private villa. By Saturday afternoon, the updates had become unbearable: a snapshot of them lounging by the pool, another of them walking arm in arm along a garden path. Each image was a dagger, but I forced myself to look. I needed to see the truth, no matter how much it hurt. By Sunday evening, I was ready. Linda came home looking radiant, a lightness in her step that hadn't been there in months. She greeted me with a warm smile and a kiss on the cheek, as if nothing had happened. "How was the retreat?" I asked, my tone carefully neutral. "Great," she said, launching into a story about a workshop on leadership skills. She was animated, her eyes bright, but all I could see was the betrayal. I nodded, playing along. Let her think she'd gotten away with it. Let her feel secure. She had no idea what was coming. Sunday night after Linda returned home, I sat in the living room, quietly watching her unpack her bags. The sight of her humming softly, folding her clothes with that same meticulousness I'd always admired, felt surreal. How could someone who just spent a weekend with another man come home and act as if everything was normal? As if nothing had changed? But something had changed, for me, at least. I had seen the pictures, read the texts, and pieced together the truth. My heart felt heavy, yet my resolve had never been clearer. Linda finished unpacking and joined me in the living room, her radiant smile still firmly in place. "So, how were the kids at your parents' place?" she asked, settling onto the couch beside me. "They had a great time," I said evenly. "Mom spoiled them, as usual." She laughed lightly, leaning back and closing her eyes. "That's good. I missed them." She said it so casually, as if her weekend hadn't been filled with deceit and betrayal. My stomach churned, but I didn't let it show. "I'm glad you had a good weekend too," I said. "The retreat must have been productive." Linda nodded. "It was. Alex organized everything perfectly. He's really good at that kind of thing." Her words landed like punches, but I forced a smile and nodded. "He seems like a competent guy." She glanced at me, perhaps sensing something in my tone, but I gave her nothing. For the rest of the evening, I kept up the charade, pretending everything was fine. I needed time to implement my plan. The next morning, Linda left for work as usual. As soon as she was gone, I began preparing. The evidence the investigator had provided me with, photos, timestamps, and even a short video, was more than enough to prove her infidelity. I organized everything into a folder labeled Truth on my laptop. Step 1 was dealing with Linda's professional life. I knew that Alex was not only her lover but also one of her firm's partners. Their relationship violated company policy, and I was ready to use that to my advantage. I sent an anonymous email to the firm's HR department, attaching the photos and texts as evidence. I crafted the email carefully, ensuring it sounded professional and devoid of malice. With that done, I moved on to step 2, our personal life. Divorce was inevitable, but I wasn't about to let Linda walk away unscathed. We had a prenup, one that heavily favored me, especially in the case of infidelity. The house, the kids, and the bulk of our assets would remain mine. All I needed was to file the paperwork. I made a call to my lawyer, Samantha, who had been a close friend for years. I trusted her implicitly, and I knew she'd handle this with precision. "Samantha, I need to start divorce proceedings," I said, my voice calm but firm. There was a pause on the other end. "Mike, what's going on?" "Linda's been cheating on me," I explained, giving her a brief rundown of what I'd discovered. Samantha sighed heavily. "I'm so sorry, Mike. That's awful. But you're doing the right thing. Send me the evidence, and I'll start drafting the papers." "Thanks, Sam. I appreciate it." After hanging up, I leaned back in my chair, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The wheels were in motion, and there was no turning back. By midweek, the fallout had begun. Linda came home on Wednesday looking visibly shaken. She dropped her purse on the counter and collapsed onto the couch, her face pale. "Rough day?" I asked, feigning concern. She nodded, rubbing her temples. "HR called me in today. Someone sent them an anonymous email accusing me of inappropriate behavior." "What kind of behavior?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. Her eyes darted to me, searching my face. "They said I've been having an affair with Alex. They had photos, Mike. Photos of us at the retreat." I leaned forward, furrowing my brow. "An affair? With Alex? Is it true?" Linda hesitated, her face crumpling. "It's not what it looks like," she began, but I held up a hand. "Yes or no, Linda? Have you been cheating on me?" Her eyes filled with tears, and she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "But it's not serious. It was just, I don't know, a stupid mistake." I sat back, crossing my arms. "A stupid mistake that you planned for months, Linda? A stupid mistake that you spent an entire weekend indulging in while I was home with our kids?" Her tears fell freely now. "Mike, please. I love you. It was a mistake, I swear. It didn't mean anything." I laughed bitterly. "Didn't mean anything? You jeopardized our marriage, your career, and our family for something that didn't mean anything?" She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Mike, I'll end it. I'll fix this. Please don't give up on us." I stared at her, my heart hardening. "You already gave up on us, Linda. I'm done." Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't comfort her. Instead, I stood and walked upstairs, leaving her alone with her guilt. The next morning, Linda was gone before I woke up. I assumed she was trying to salvage her job, but I didn't care. I spent the day at the lawyer's office, signing the divorce papers Samantha had prepared. We decided to serve Linda the papers on Friday, giving her a couple of days to stew in the mess she'd created. Friday arrived with a sense of finality. When Linda came home that evening, I was waiting for her in the living room, the divorce papers laid out neatly on the coffee table. "What's this?" she asked, her voice trembling. "It's over, Linda," I said simply. "I'm filing for divorce." Her eyes widened, and she shook her head. "No. Mike, please. We can work through this. I'll do whatever it takes. I stood, looking her directly in the eyes. You already did enough. This is what you deserve. Her face crumpled as she sank onto the couch, sobbing. But her tears didn't move me. They only solidified my resolve. I turned and walked away, leaving her to confront the reality she had created. Linda's sobs echoed in my mind long after I walked away, but they didn't touch the steely resolve I'd built over the past week. She had made her choices, and now she would face the consequences. I knew the days ahead would be messy and emotional, but I was ready. For too long, I had ignored the signs, letting her disrespect me and our marriage. That ended now. Saturday morning, I woke early, the sunlight streaming through the curtains of my now silent bedroom. Linda had spent the night on the couch, and when I passed through the living room to make coffee, she was still there, curled up under a throw blanket, her face blotchy from crying. For a brief moment, I felt a twinge of pity, but it was fleeting. The image of her laughing with Alex, her hand in his, flashed in my mind, and my resolve hardened. I spent most of the morning with the kids, distracting myself with their chatter and laughter. Dylan and Ava didn't know anything about what was happening yet, and I wanted to keep it that way for as long as possible. Their innocence was the only thing keeping me grounded. Linda finally emerged around noon, her hair disheveled and her eyes puffy. She avoided my gaze as she moved around the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of water. I need to talk to you, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. I think we've said all there is to say, I replied without looking up from the puzzle Ava and I were working on. Mike, please, she said, her voice breaking. Not here. Not in front of the kids. I glanced at her, then at the kids. Dylan, can you watch your sister for a bit? Your mom and I need to talk. Dylan nodded solemnly, sensing the tension in the room, and ushered Ava toward the playroom. Once they were gone, Linda sat across from me at the kitchen table, clutching her glass like a lifeline. I made a mistake, she began, her voice trembling. A terrible, stupid mistake. I know I hurt you, but I want to fix this. I'll end things with Alex. I'll go to counseling. Whatever it takes. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. Linda, this isn't just a mistake. It's a betrayal. You didn't trip and fall into an affair. You planned this. Lied to me. Disrespected our marriage and our family. Tears streamed down her face as she shook her head. I know. I know, Mike. I was selfish and stupid. But I still love you. I love our family. Don't throw it all away because of one terrible decision. You threw it away, I said coldly. The moment you decided that your selfish desires were more important than the vows we made. She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Please, she begged, her voice cracking. Don't let this be the end. It already is, I replied, standing up. The divorce papers are filed. We'll work out custody arrangements and divide everything fairly, but there's no coming back from this, Linda. Her face crumpled, and she buried it in her hands, sobbing. I stood there for a moment, watching her, then walked away, leaving her to her grief. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of legal meetings, custody discussions, and awkward cohabitation. Linda moved into the guest room, and we communicated only when necessary. The kids noticed the tension, of course, but I told them we were going through some changes and that everything would be okay. I hated lying to them, but I wasn't ready to explain the full truth. Linda, for her part, tried everything she could to win me back. She cooked my favorite meals, left apologetic notes around the house, and even booked a counseling session for us. I didn't go. Her efforts felt hollow, too little, too late. Meanwhile, the fallout from her affair continued to ripple through her life. She was suspended from her job while the firm conducted an investigation, and whispers of the scandal spread through her professional and social circles. She barely left the house, spending most of her time in the guest room, staring blankly at her laptop. One evening, about a month after I filed for divorce, Linda approached me while I was watching TV. "Can we talk?" she asked hesitantly. I muted the TV and gestured for her to sit. "I got a call from HR today," she began, twisting her hands in her lap. "They're letting me go. Alex, too. They said the company's reputation can't survive this kind of scandal." I nodded but didn't respond. "I don't know what I'm going to do," she continued, her voice cracking. "This job was everything to me, Mike. I don't know how to start over." "That's not my problem," I said bluntly. "You made your bed, Linda. Now you have to lie in it." She flinched at my words, tears welling in her eyes. "Do you hate me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I sighed, leaning forward. "I don't hate you, Linda. I'm just done. Done with the lies, the betrayal, the constant pretending. I deserve better than this, and so do the kids." Her tears fell freely now, but I didn't comfort her. I couldn't. My energy was focused on rebuilding my life, not salvaging hers. By the time the divorce was finalized, Linda had moved out, taking only her personal belongings and a few keepsakes. The house, the car, and primary custody of the kids remained with me. It was bittersweet watching her drive away, knowing that the woman I had loved for so many years was now just a painful chapter in my life. That evening, as I tucked Dylan and Ava into bed, I felt a strange sense of peace. The storm had passed, and though the road ahead would be challenging, I knew I had made the right choice. I kissed my kids goodnight and whispered a promise to myself: would build a life worth living, free from betrayal and heartache. And I would never settle for less than I deserved again. In the months after Linda moved out, life began to settle into a new rhythm. The house was quieter, emptier, but it was peaceful in a way that felt like a hard-won reprieve. Dylan and Ava adjusted remarkably well, though I knew they missed their mom. I did everything I could to fill the void: soccer games, movie nights, lazy Sunday mornings making pancakes. I poured my energy into being the kind of father they deserved, even as I wrestled with my own lingering hurt. Linda reached out occasionally, mostly about the kids. Her texts were polite, almost timid, a stark contrast to the confident, vibrant woman I once knew. She'd found a small apartment on the other side of town and was working part-time at a local nonprofit. It wasn't the high-powered career she'd once had, but I supposed it was a start. I didn't think much about her anymore. My focus was on the future, on healing and moving forward. But life, as it often does, had other plans. It was a Friday evening when the call came. I was in the kitchen, helping Ava with her math homework while Dylan played video games in the living room. The number on my phone was unfamiliar, but I answered anyway. "Mr. Peterson?" The voice on the other end was calm but urgent. "This is Officer Thompson with the City Police Department. I'm calling about your wife, ex-wife, Linda." My stomach tightened. "What's going on?" "There's been an accident," he said. "A car crash. She's at Mercy General Hospital. You should come as soon as you can." The world tilted for a moment, and I had to steady myself against the counter. Is she okay?" The officer hesitated. "She's in critical condition. They're doing everything they can." I hung up, my hands shaking. I told the kids there was an emergency and called my sister to come over. She arrived within minutes, and I barely managed to explain before rushing out the door. The hospital was a blur of sterile hallways and hushed voices. A nurse led me to the ICU, where Linda lay motionless in a tangle of tubes and wires. Her face was pale, her body eerily still. It didn't seem real, this woman who had once been so full of life reduced to fragility. A doctor approached, his expression grave. "Mr. Peterson?" I nodded. "I'm Dr. Hargrave. Linda suffered severe internal injuries in the crash, along with significant head trauma. We've done everything we can, but, the damage is extensive. I'm sorry, but it's unlikely she'll recover. The words hit me like a sledgehammer. I felt a wave of nausea, my knees threatening to buckle. Can I talk to her? I asked, my voice barely audible. She's not conscious, the doctor said gently. But you can sit with her. I nodded numbly and took a seat beside her bed. Her chest rose and fell with the aid of the ventilator, each breath a harsh reminder of her fragility. I reached for her hand, shocked by how cold it felt. Linda, I whispered, my throat tight. It's me. Mike. There was no response, no flicker of recognition. I swallowed hard, the weight of unspoken words pressing down on me. Despite everything that had happened, I didn't want it to end like this. I'm angry at you, I said quietly. So angry. You broke my heart, Linda. You destroyed our family. But I don't want this. I don't want to lose you. Tears blurred my vision as I continued. The kids need you. I need you. Maybe not the way I used to, but you're still a part of me. A part of us. The words felt hollow in the sterile silence of the room. The machines beeped steadily, indifferent to my grief. Linda clung to life for 3 more days. The doctors called it a miracle, but it wasn't enough. Her body couldn't heal, and on the 4th day, they gently suggested it was time to let her go. I wrestled with the decision, but in the end, I knew it was the only choice. I called Dylan and Ava to the hospital, explaining as best I could that their mom wasn't going to get better. Their tears broke something inside me, but I stayed strong for them. When the time came, we gathered around Linda's bed. I held her hand as the machines were turned off, the harsh beeping replaced by an unbearable silence. She slipped away quietly, her final breath a fragile whisper. The weeks that followed were a haze of grief and guilt. The kids leaned on me, and I leaned on them, each of us struggling to navigate a world without Linda. I found myself questioning everything, what I could have done differently, whether my anger had kept me from seeing the signs of her pain. One evening, while cleaning out Linda's apartment, I found a journal tucked away in a drawer. I hesitated, then opened it, the pages filled with her neat handwriting. Her words were raw and confessional, a window into a mind that had been racked with guilt and self-doubt. She wrote about the affair, calling it the worst mistake of her life. She wrote about her love for me and the kids, her desperation to make amends. But one entry, dated just a week before the crash, stopped me cold. I don't think Mike will ever forgive me. And I don't blame him. But I hope one day, he'll understand that I never stopped loving him. Even when I failed him, I loved him. Tears blurred the words as I closed the journal and held it to my chest. For the first time since the crash, I let myself grieve, not just for Linda, but for the life we had lost, the family we could have been. And in that moment, I forgave her. Not because she deserved it, but because I needed to let go. Life was too short for anything else.